Good morning and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. This morning we're going to study Psalm 35. Psalm 35 is a psalm which I knew less than some of the psalms we've looked at recently. And I spent some time learning about it and studying it in preparation for this class, though this week I have to be honest, there were a lot of things that came up that were unexpected that meant that I spent less time with it. So we'll have to explore it together. And like our usual practice, we look at the Psalms with an eye toward what is the emotional or what is the spiritual um frame that frame of mind that you might be in when this psalm would specifically speak to you. So what emotions rise up for you when reading the psalm, and what in what spiritual frame of mind might you be in that those emotions would be useful to evoke, right? How might this psalm be a prayer? Mark.
I only read it this morning, so I didn't really study it. But my first reaction was, boy, was David having a bad day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In some ways, well, it's like I said, I I find that these psalms really are very fruitful in terms of my own spiritual life, and certainly, uh, yesterday was one of the hard days, one of the
Mm,
hard days. So we'll jump into the psalm, talk about enemies without and enemies within, and think about, you know, David's state of mind. and how we might use this psalm, and we'll look at a few of the liturgical references. The truth is, this psalm is very underutilized in prayer.
mm.
Um,
See why?
yeah, I mean, I don't have a particularly great answer to why did the people who put R.C. Dewar together like this psalm and not this psalm, but like why did they love 34 and have that all over the place, but 35 less so. I, I'd like to say, oh, well, there are just better psalms and worse psalms. Like, and that might be true. I mean, different folks relate differently to different poetry, so you can't objectively say this psalm is better and this psalm is worse, because different people and different states of mind might interact with the psalms in different moments. But I think that the authors of the Siddur, the authors of our liturgy, of our prayer book, definitely gravitated towards some psalms more than others. And then on the other side, I find it hard to definitively say, this psalm is better and this psalm is worse, when the criteria that I would use to decide that largely have to do with my familiarity with the psalms, and my familiarity is based on the use of those psalms in liturgy, and so it is rather circular to make that kind of an argument, like, oh, Psalm 34 is a better psalm because I know it more, because it's in the Siddur, which must be why it's a better, like, yeah, so that feels very circular to me. So I don't have a great answer to that, Mark. But in any case, we'll jump into Psalm 35 and get to know it together. So let me share my screen so you can follow along with me. Here is Psalm 35. LeDavid, Riva Adonai et Yerivai, Lecham et Lochamai. Hachazek magen v'tzina v'kuma be'ezrati, v'harek chanit uskor likrat rodfai, emor lenafshi yeshuatech ani. Yevoshu v'yikalmu mivakshe nafshi, yisogu achor v'yachperu choshvei ra'ati. Yihu kimotz lifnei ruach umalach Adonai doche. Yihi darkam choshech v'chal lakot umalach Adonai rodfam. Ki chinam tamnu li shachat rishtam chinam chafru lenafshi. Tivoehu shoah lo yeda virishto asher taman tilkedo bishoah yipol ba. Venafshi tagil badonai tasis bishuato. Kol atzmotai tomarna Adonai mi chamocha matzil ani mechazak mimenu va'ani ve'evyon migozalo. Yikumun adei Hamas asher lo yadati yish aluni. Yishalmuni ra'a tachat tova shechol nafshi va'ani bachalotam levushi sak ineti vatzom nafshi utfilati al cheki tashuv kerea keach li hitalachti keavel aim koder shachoti Uvetzal'i samchu v'nesafu nesfu alai nechim velo yadati karu velo damu bechanfei lage ma'og harok alai shinemo Adonai kama tir'eh hashiva nafshi mishohem mikfirim yechidati Odecha b'kahal rav be'am atzum ahaleka al yismechu li oivai sheker son'ei chinam yikretzu ayin ki lo shalom yidaberu ve'al rig'ei eretz divrei mirmot yechashovun ve'yarchivu alai pihem amru he'ach ra'ata einenu Ra'ita Adonai al techerash Adonai al tirchak mimeni. Ha'ira v'hakitza lemishpati Elohai v'Adonai l'rivi shofteni kitzid kecha Adonai Elohai v'al yismechu li al yomru bilibam heach nafshenu al yomru bila anuhu Yevoshu v'yachperu yachdav simechei rati yilbeshu boshet uchlima hamagdilim alai. Yaronu v'yismechu chafatzei tzidki v'yomru tamid yigdal Adonai hechafetz shalom avdo ulshoni teget tzidkecha kol hayom tehilatecha.
I
We'll
think
read
this
a
becomes the
we'll read a
longest.
couple of the English. Yeah, it's a little longer than ones we've done recently. Um, not the longest one we've done so far, but it's on the longer side. Well, read a few of the translations. The RJPS translation. We'll start with that one. Of David, O Eternal One, strive with my adversaries, give battle to my foes, take up shield and buckler and come to my defense, ready the spear and javelin against my pursuers. Tell me, I am your deliverance. Let those who seek my life be frustrated and put to shame. Let those who plan to harm me fall back in disgrace. Let them be as chaff in the wind, God's angel driving them on. Let their path be dark and slippery, with God's angel in pursuit. For without cause they hid a net to trap me. Without cause they dug a pit for me. Let disaster overtake them unawares. Let the net they hid catch them. Let them fall into it when disaster strikes. Then shall I exult in God, rejoice in having been delivered. All my bones shall say, Eternal One, who is like you? You save a pauper from someone stronger, a needy pauper from a despoiler. Malicious witnesses appear who question me about things I do not know. They repay me evil for good, seeking my bereavement. Yet when they were ill, my dress was sackcloth. I kept a fast. May what I prayed for happen to me. I walked about as though it were my friend or my kin. I was bowed with gloom like one mourning for a mother. But when I stumble, they gleefully gather. Wretches gather against me. I know not why. They tear at me without end. With impious, mocking grimace, they gnash their teeth at me. O my sovereign, how long will you look on? Rescue me from their attacks, my precious life from the lions, that I may praise you in a great congregation, acclaim you with a mighty throng. Let not my treacherous enemies rejoice over me, or those who hate me without reason wink their eyes, for they do not offer amity, but devise fraudulent schemes against harmless folk. They open wide their mouths at me, saying, "Ah, ha, ha, we have seen it. You have seen it, O Eternal One. Do not hold aloof. O my sovereign, be not far from me. Wake, rouse yourself for my cause, for my claim, O my God and my sovereign. Take up my cause, O my eternal God, as you are beneficent, and let them not rejoice over me. Let them not think, ah, just what we wished. Let them not say, we have destroyed him. May those who rejoice at my misfortune be frustrated and utterly disgraced. May those who vaunt themselves over me be clad in frustration and shame. May those who desire my vindication sing forth joyously. May they always say, extolled be God who desires the well being of one who renders service. All my tongue shall recite your beneficent acts, your praises all day long.
Wow.
Let's do the Koren Tehillim of David. Strive, Lord, with those who strive against me. Fight those who fight against me. Take up shield and buckler, come to my defense. Uncover the spear and bar the way in the face of my pursuers. Say to me, I am your salvation. May those who seek my life be disgraced and shamed. May those who plot my ruin be turned back in disgrace. May they be like chaff before the wind, with the angel of the Lord driving them on. May their path be dark and slippery, with the angel of the Lord pursuing them. For without cause they have laid their net for me. Without cause they have dug a pit for me. But destruction will overtake them unawares, and the net they laid will catch them. They will fall into it to their destruction. Then my soul will rejoice in the Lord and delight in his deliverance. All my bones will say, Lord, who is like you? You save the poor from one stronger than he, the poor and the needy from his despoiler. Malicious witnesses come forward. They question me on things of which I know nothing. They repay me evil for good. They seek my undoing. Yet when they were sick, I put on sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. May it come to me what I prayed for them. I went about. Sorry, I spilled my tea. I went about as though grieving for a friend or a brother, bowed in gloom as though mourning for a mother. But when I stumble, they gather round with glee. Even cripples gather against me, and those I do not know tear me to pieces without ceasing. With profane, mocking gestures, they gnash their teeth at me. How long, Lord, will you look on? Rescue my life from their onslaughts, my precious soul from the lions. Then I will praise you in the great assembly, extol you before a mighty throng. Let not my treacherous enemies rejoice over me. Let not those who hate me without cause wink maliciously, for they do not speak of peace, but devise deceitful schemes against the oppressed in the land. They open wide their mouths against me, crying, Hurrah, hurrah, our eye has seen it. You have seen it all, Lord. Be not silent. Do not be far from me, Lord. Awake and rise to my defense, to plead my cause, my Lord, my God and Lord. Do me justice as you are just yourself, Lord my God. Do not let them gloat over me. Do not let them say to themselves, Hurrah, that's what we wished. Let them not say, We have swallowed him up. May those who gloat over my misfortune be shamed and disgraced. May those who exalt themselves over me be covered with shame and confusion. But may those who would see me vindicated shout for joy and gladness. May they always say, Magnified be the Lord who delights in the success of his servant. Then shall my tongue speak of your justice, and all day long of your praise. So, thoughts, reactions? Natalie.
It, it is very, very clear when you say this. You say this now in response to the world's response to Hamas fighting against Israel. It's exactly the have, and it's immediately what I thought of. Here is the world telling us that Israel should not have responded as it has, and Hamas is the one that we should be fighting against, and keep telling the world that we are right, Israel is right, we have been attacked, and why is God not silencing all these people who are don't see our point of view, which is the correct point of view, and God doesn't seem to be answering us yet. Doesn't God see that we were attacked by Hamas, and why is the world having all these pro-Palestinian um, responses all over the world?
Yeah. Yet when they were sick, I put on sackcloth, right?
Yes,
The
yes, we
Jewish
have taken
people,
care
the
of.
Jewish people seem to be more upset in some ways about the destruction of innocent Palestinian lives than the Palestinian leadership seems to be about the destruction of innocent Palestinian.
Yes, this could be in the headlines today.
Yeah, we put on sackcloth when our enemies are hurting, and
And we
they
mourn
gather,
for them. Yes.
we mourn them, and they stumble, and when we stumble, they gather around with glee. So Natalie says this psalm reminds her of the current moment. Alba.
Okay, that's not exactly what came into my mind. You know that series, The Handmaid's Tale, and the book by Margaret Atwood?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I watch this and I look at millenniums 50 years younger than I am. We'll sit there and, oh my God, this is terrible. This is terrible. That was my entire youth. That was most of my adult life. Even my idiot brother could get a loan from a bank, and I had to get his signature or my dad's signature to put it there, to get a loan. And when I look at that series, it's like ho hum, yet again, same routine, nothing changes, And when I listen to this, it's like um I've been sitting here trying to be a productive, efficient individual, human being, intelligent, trying to make the world move on. But just because of the state of being female, I have to go through all these hoops. They're really stupid. And I start to get really irritated when some guy sits there and moans and groans at me. Oh, nothing's fair. Well, yeah. Have you tried being female for a day?
All right, so
So
Alba says the first thing that jumped into her mind was not the enemies of the Jewish people like Hamas, but instead the experience of being female in the world. For without cause they have laid their net for me. Without cause they have dug a pit for me. But destruction will take them unawares, and the net they laid will catch them. They will fall into it in their destruction, right? Then my soul will rejoice in the Lord, right? So there's a way in which this psalm could be about this experience of being um of being uh, of feeling that society does not speak of peace. Society, it's all these men who are sitting on their couches and plotting wicked schemes to keep women down, and they open their mouths wide against me. They are hurrah, hurrah, we're gloating, but God is going to rise to the defense of those in society that are disadvantaged, whether that be women or some other group. All right, so we've had two very different reactions. Gary.
Yeah, I almost see it as a lament of a leader and a universal message to leaders that very often this is going to happen. That despite your good intentions, despite what you think, you're always going to have them snipping at your heels. It's in corporate America or wherever, and this, especially in democratic countries where you have to put down where people are allowed to speak up, and you can't put it down with oppression.
All right, Gary says there's a reason why this psalm is of David, right? David is the king of Israel, and this psalm is in some ways about the frustrations of leadership, about how David or any leader has to deal with the with the dissent within the population. And there are going to be malicious witnesses who appear, who question the leader about things that the leader doesn't know about. They repay my evil for good. They repay me evil for good, seeking my downfall, my bereavement, right? But ultimately, may those who desire my vindication sing forth joyously. Those who rejoice at my misfortune will be frustrated, but the ones who were on my side, they're going to end up singing in the end. Murray.
I see the opposite way, closer to Marx. It expresses an emotion that happens to each and every human being. We reach a very
Call
low.
the class, I can't talk to you.
Go ahead, Murray.
So I'm a more closer to Marx's remark, where it's a very human emotion will reach periodically in our lives and happens more than once, a very low point. It's a very low point. And what do we do is that why all this is happening and nobody is responding. Lord, you know all about this and you are not responding. It is sort of flailing out a little bit because the person has had put it in the vernacular, a bad hair day.
Yeah. So Murray says this isn't about leadership, or it's not only about leadership. This is the kind of this is the psalmist's version of that kid's book, Alexander and the No Good, Terrible, Horrible, Very Bad Day. This is an example of how of a low point in that can happen emotionally in anyone's day. And when you feel that kind of low point, you want to say to God, "Oh, my sovereign, how long will you look on?" Right? You know what's going on with me, God. Why? You know you have seen it, O Eternal One. Do not hold aloof. Don't be far away from me. Why are you doing nothing? How are you? Why? How can you just watch as all of this bad stuff happens to me? I just want to move to Australia, right? That's and then at the end of that psalm, I mean, at the end of that book, the Alexander is talking to his mother, and his mother says, "You know what? There are no good, very bad days, even in Australia. Sometimes that happens to everyone. You can't necessarily get it by running away." Larry.
There's a special poison in this, I think, which is betrayal. It's not just the bad things are happening and you don't know why. It's my friends, those who I thought were my allies, were my supporters, who I've put out for. They inexplicably have betrayed me. They have resented me all this time, and I never understood that.
Yeah, so I definitely think that you're right, that there's a way in which the psalmist or David or whoever the speaker is, he is able to access or to empathize with the humanity of his enemies, of the other people around. And it surprises him that they seem to be unable to access his humanity also. Like, okay, maybe we're on two different sides of the political spectrum. Maybe you oppose my leadership. Maybe you're my enemy. Maybe you actually seek my harm. But when uh but when the like when my grandmother's gravestone gets knocked over, shouldn't you be able to access the basic human decency of feeling sad about that? Why does it feel like you have no empathy for me? When that happened to you, I walked around like I was in mourning. And then when it happened to me, when misfortune happened to me, you seem to be just laughing and gleeful and maybe it's his friends, like you said, Larry. Maybe it's his compatriots. But even if it's his enemies, he seems to have some empathy for them that he feels like they do not have for him. Alba.
I think Larry hit the nail on the head. The idea of betrayal. You go out and you do the best you can. And then someone says, if you go to university, you'll get a degree and then you'll get a good job and la, 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 la. And then when you do that, it doesn't work that way. You're like, what is this? Why did you tell me that? Why didn't you tell me what was really going to happen, And then I could sort of like focus myself and deal with it. But that feeling of betrayal, really does kind of get to you sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's whether the whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Whether the betrayal is a betrayal of friends, friends who were supporting you, or whether the betrayal is a more societal, a betrayal that the world doesn't work the way that you were taught it should work, or whether the betrayal is of your own body, which is an aspect of this that we haven't talked about. But there is a clear through line in this psalm of disease, of a physical attack on your on the body. Let's see if we can upload those. There's a way in which his very bones feel attacked. And it's his bones who will respond, Eternal One who is like you. They tear at me without end. They gnash their teeth at me. There's definitely a way to read this psalm where there's an internal enemy, and that's definitely how some of the tradition has interpreted this psalm.
See that.
So Lisa.
Hi, good morning. I'm sorry I'm off camera. Hopefully I'll be able to get on before the end. This is reminding me a lot of a term that's both terrible to use relating to this, and also I feel apropos, is gaslighting. It's this term that's made it into popular culture where the victim has convinced everybody around, or the perpetrator has convinced everybody that their victim is really the aggressor. And there's this bending and twisting of reality on both the victims who begins to question reality and our perception of events, and where others are told this story that's reality flipped on its head. And and there are times where when this happens in a smaller sense, on a more personal level, like we can completely lose ourselves. We break with reality and begin to question not just our perception of events, but our morals, our values. Are we hearing God? Where have we gone wrong? We begin to buy in. And the challenge is to stay true to God and stay true to ourselves and to one another. And the more we do that, right, the more we stand firm for who we are, the more we are seen as the aggressor, even though we've been victimized. That our steadfastness is seen as something completely the opposite of what it is. And I'm also, this question of God, like, where is God? Why is God allowing this? Is this something God, like, what are we missing? What are we, what, have we made God so upset? Or, I feel like, and this is something I've asked myself a lot in terms of what's going on, and the insane, like the surreal climate of anti-Semitism we're living in now is, am I missing something? What am I not seeing? Like, how can it not be so obvious? So that's what I have. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. For unprovoked, they set their net trap for me. Unprovoked, they dug a pit for my life. There's just a real surprise about this. Let not my unprovoked enemies rejoice over me, for they do not speak peace. They say they're for peace, but really they're for the destruction of me and my people. They stand out there saying, we support everybody equally. We just want to save all lives. But that in fact doesn't, it gaslights, it completely ignores the the actual what's actually going on. You, Lord, have seen, do not be mute. Rouse yourself, wake for my cause. Judge me by your justice. I know I'm in the right here. Let them not say in their heart, hurrah for ourselves. We have devoured him. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about gaslighting in this context, this world.
I'm struck also, if I just might add one more thought, that, that we do have, our Jewish brothers and sisters who have, who do question the reality of what is happening, that division is happening. And, very hard to come back from a break like that, not just amongst our own people, but just on a personal level as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to that too. Larry.
I think the thing is that Western culture especially feels we've betrayed it because we Jews are supposed to be the scapegoat. And here we are not behaving like a scapegoat.
So there's an embedded thing in the Western Christian world that wants to see Jews in a particular way, and
Yes.
we're not behaving in that way.
Hmm.
Gary Reich.
Yeah, first of all, I always learn a lot listening to the others. It's really great. There's I think a beautiful translation in this little book that I have, so I thought I would just read it out for you.
Please.
This is the second half of verse 13. It says, I afflicted myself through fasting, and my prayer rested on my bosom. It was like a friend, like a brother to me.
Interesting. So the prayer, the friend and the brother, which is from the first part of verse 14, is understood to be describing the prayer of verse 13, as opposed to modifying how you were mourning. I was bent in gloom like mourning a brother, or I was or maybe the prayer is like a friend in my bosom. Has a very powerful a possibility of what the words could mean. Yeah, I like that. Natalie.
You can excuse me, you can take this very personally too. I'm a very good person. Why, like Rabbi Kutcher says, why are these bad things happening to a good person? And why is everyone so happy? All the people I thought were my friends they're so happy that something bad finally happened to me, and they are laughing behind my back that even I could get into trouble by by this one thing that I did that they didn't expect me to do, because I'm usually such a good person and I wouldn't think of doing any harm to anybody else. But somehow I did, and everyone is glad that they finally saw that I'm not perfect.
Nice. So we do have some quotes from this psalm in our liturgy, though not very many. One of the special prayers for the 10th of Tevet, which is a fast day that recalls the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem, uses the image from the very beginning of our psalm, the sword and buckler, which in the psalm says, you know, Hachazek Magen Vitzina, right? The psalm is asking God to take up the shield and buckler, or maybe asking yourself to take up your own shield and buckler in defense of yourself. But the poem about the 10th of Tevet imagines the enemies wearing the sword and buckler and coming at us, which is not, I think, what the psalm means. And so I don't know whether this is really a quote from the psalm exactly, or whether it's just that this phrase, like the sword and buckler, is a phrase that can be used to talk about violence or, preparing for war. So I'm not convinced it really counts as a as a quote of our psalm in liturgy, but it is the same words, and it is in a prayer. The Mizrahi tradition includes in the Elohai Nitzor paragraph, which we've at the end of the Amidah, which we've actually discussed, because there are other verses from Psalms that are quoted in that paragraph, and which we've looked at some of those other verses. But the paragraph at the end of the Amidah says, "My God, keep my tongue from evil, my lips from deceit. Help me ignore those who would slander me. Help me be humble before all. Open my heart to your Torah, that I may pursue your mitzvot. Frustrate the designs of those who plot evil against me. Nullify their schemes." Right. Right. So the Mizrahi tradition adds in a verse right after that, the verse 5 from our psalm. Let them be as chaff in the wind, God's angel driving them on. Right. So, frustrate the designs of those who plot evil against me, nullify their schemes. Let them be as chaff in the wind, God's angel driving them on. Act for the sake of your name, act for the sake of your triumph, act for the sake of your holiness. Right. So the Ashkenazi the Ashkenazi prayer does not include that verse in that paragraph, but some versions of that paragraph do include it. Alba.
This is a general question.
Yeah.
A psalm is a psalm, and they appear every now and again in the liturgy. But as far as I know, if you don't have a whole lot of time, you can cancel the psalms. You can jump over them, like on Kabbalat Shabbat. You don't have to sing all of the psalms, and you don't have to sing all of a particular psalm. You can sing the first couplet, the last couplet, or you can just eliminate them completely. Am I right in saying that? That's the first question I have.
Well, ask your second question, then I'll respond.
Okay, the second question is a psalm a prayer, or is it a piece of literature that says it so well that we borrow it to use in the liturgy? Or is a psalm a prayer itself, and we just take pieces of that prayer and spread them around?
Yeah, it's a good question. All right. So first of all, you're right that you're right that in terms of in Jewish liturgy, there are some parts which are considered like halachically required, mandated. You have to say these words at this time. This is the central portion of the prayer service. And then there are parts that surround that, which are about getting in the right mood, or about connecting in a particular way, or about offering praise of God. And those are much more flexible about what you can say and what you can't say. In our class, when we look at the liturgical uses of the Psalms, we see both examples where we have the whole psalm used as part of our warm-up service, for example, and then like you could just do one verse from that psalm. You could read that psalm and meditate on each verse. You could do only that psalm and none of the other psalms. You could different Shabbat mornings. You can pick and choose different psalms for warm up, and there isn't a halachic requirement to say all of these psalms in this particular order in this way. You could replace a psalm with a different poem. So you could do psalms in translation. You don't have to say them in Hebrew, right? So it is true. We also have, right, paragraphs of prayers, including prayers from the central section of our service, that have incorporated or used verses from Psalms. That is a little different, because you've incorporated it into another prayer, that is, you still have to say those words, right? And another thing that we've seen is anthologies, where we've got 15 verses from all different psalms that all have the same theme, say, of God's kingship. Well, we've taken all of these psalms, all of these verses that have to do with God's dominion or God's being the sovereign, and we put them all together in one new psalm that's an anthology of verses from psalms and sometimes from other places, right? So we've seen all three of those different aspects. So it is true that you don't have to say that there's less of a halachic requirement to say the entirety of a psalm when it's used in it as a warm up. But when a verse from Psalms is quoted, then it's different. Now, are the Psalms prayers? Clearly, some of them were written as prayers, and some of them were written as prayers to be used in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, or as part of the sacrificial worship system, right? And some of our Psalms, like, it seems very obvious that they are doing that. And we have cognate Psalms for some of them, that are similar to worship Psalms from other ancient Near Eastern worship. So, like, we have extant some psalms of praise to Baal, for example, the Canaanite god. And we can see how some of our psalms have similar phrases or similar structures to some of those psalms. So maybe they're not psalms. Some of those liturgical poems that are that we have, that in cuneiform tablets or whatever, we have extant pre biblical psalms, worship prayers for other gods in the ancient Near East. So, right, so we know that some of our psalms are that. Some of our psalms are historical psalms. They share about an aspect of history or something in David's life. Some of them are explicitly prayerful, and some of them are clearly just poetry. But all of them, I think, have sort of this emotional or spiritual aspect that, like all good poetry, we can engage with it and have it have a spiritual resonance for us. Does that answer your question? Yeah, Alba.
All right. Yeah, that was great. There is a thing here that most of the synagogues in Spain, all 12 of them, they're Sephardic and they don't use Psalms at all. They use the Song of Songs. So the
Well,
Kabbalat
you mean
Shabbat
for
service
Kabbalat Shabbat?
for
Yeah.
Kabbalat Shabbat,
It's not
you
true
know.
that they don't use Psalms at all.
Oh no, of course they do use some. They do use some. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be using Song of Songs, that's where the question came from. Are they really prayers, or are we talking about great literature? Because people quote Shakespeare all the time. I mean, they're even the title of movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And all you have to say is a band of brothers, and bang, the entirety of Henry V comes to your mind. So I was thinking maybe that's how Psalms worked. You say one line and bang, the whole thing comes to mind because all its emotion.
Yes, I definitely think that that's the idea. I think that the way the rabbis understood Psalms is that these were poems that evoked emotional or spiritual states of mind, and that by using a part of them, you can evoke that whole emotional resonance as part of your prayer. I think because we know scripture less than the ancient rabbis, we sometimes miss the embedded emotional impact that the prayers are supposed to have, because we aren't necessarily like able to immediately pull to mind the psalm that was coming from. And so part of what this class is doing for me is helping me to connect the aspects from our liturgy to their original psalms. Like here's a good example, right? Verse 10 is like, as I was reading to you this psalm, that verse I know very, very well. Like when I got to that verse, I read it confidently. Like I know I've read this verse a lot of times. Kol atzmotai tomarna Adonai mi chamocha matzil ani mechazak mimenu v'ani v'evyon mi gozlo. I say that every Saturday morning. I have a special tune I like to do it. It goes Kol atzmotai tomarna Adonai mi chamocha matzil ani mechazak mimenu v'ani v'evyon mi gozlo. Right? This is from our Nishmat prayer, from the very end of our warm-up prayer. And there, but this is an interesting case, right? In this case, it's an actual quote. It says, fulfilling the psalm of the song of the psalmists, quote, and then this verse, right? So, but I didn't give you the whole Nishmat prayer, but here's the section that this is from, right? And so the organs you formed within us, the spirit and the soul you breathed into our nostrils, the tongue you placed in our mouths, they will all thank and bless, praise and acclaim, exalt and honor, sanctify and crown your name, our sovereign. Let every mouth thank you. Let every tongue pledge loyalty. Every knee bend to you. Every body bow before you. Every heart be loyal to you, and every fiber of our being chant your name, fulfilling the psalm of the psalmist, as it says in Psalm 35, verse 10. Every bone in my body cries out, Adonai, who is like you, saving the poor from the powerful, the afflicted and impoverished from those who prey on them, right? So here, our verse is used as a proof text. What does it really mean to say, when the psalmist says, Kol atzmotai tomarna, right? Every bone in my body cries out to you, God. What does that really mean? Well, that really means every mouth, every tongue, every knee, every body, every heart, every fiber of our being, right? Like, what does it mean for our bones to cry out? It's every part of us. And so it's being used here as a proof text. Almost like if you were writing an essay and you wanted to make a point. And so then you say, well, this point actually can be proved really well by this verse from Torah, right? and here the verse from Psalms, right? Here's another example. I taught 3 or 4 years ago to the congregation. I think with the help of Alana Sandberg, who is going to be ordained as a rabbi in just a few days. But at the time, she was our high holiday student leader, and a rabbinical student. She and I taught the congregation a new tune to one of the poems on Rosh Hashanah, and it goes, and everybody repeats the last line of the prayer. And then the leader says, Vivarchu Shem Kevodecha, and everybody does the last line. Vitnu lecha keter melucha, and then it goes higher. Yagidu v'im tzidkecha, and everybody says, Vitnu lecha keter melucha, yamba di da di da di da, yamba badai, yamba di da di da di da, yamba badai. So, okay, the sixth line of this song is Vayomru Tamid Yigdal Adonai, which it turns out is actually a direct quote from this psalm. Vayomru Tamid Yigdal Adonai is a quote from verse 27. Vayomru Tamid Yigdal Adonai. But I did not know that. And I didn't know it until I was preparing for this class. And so, like, on Rosh Hashanah, when we're reading this psalm, you might be singing along the Yided Eyes, and you might be reading the English translation, but you would just think that it says, and all the ends of the earth shall praise you, and shall always say, may the Lord forever be exalted. You wouldn't necessarily know that's actually the middle stick of verse 27 of Psalm 35, where in its context it means, may those who desire my vindication sing forth joyously. May they always say, extolled be God, who desires the well-being of one who renders service. Right? If you only take these words, may they always say, extolled be God, which is what it is, Vayomru Tamid Yigdal Adonai, may they always say, extolled be God, you miss the context of the rest of the verse, that this is not just extolled be God, but that God desires the shalom of people who serve God, right? God desires the well-being of people who deserve God, right? And you miss the emotional impact of the entire psalm, which, as we talked about together today, is actually about an extremely low point in your emotional in the emotional life of that you really feel like there are enemies all around, and that you've had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, and it's only this hope, this prayer, may it happen that the people who seek my vindication will always be able to say that God is extolled, right? But it's in its context in the prayer on Rosh Hashanah, you wouldn't necessarily know that context. But I think the person who wrote this liturgical prayer, that person knew for sure that this was not just a quote from Psalms, but like this particular psalm and what its original context was. And so, right, I do think that recognizing that a lot of the phrases, it's sort of like Alba, you mentioned Shakespeare. When you read Shakespeare and then you just interact with people in English, in the English language, turns out a lot of the things we say are very affected by Shakespeare's command of the language. We just say things without realizing that they are actually or that the original person who wrote them or said them or conceived of them was Shakespeare. And I think this is sort of, we read our prayers without realizing that the origin is actually a verse from Psalms. And in this case, we wouldn't know that that's a quote. I like put in the quotes, but if you like quotation marks to emphasize that it's a quote. But if you just look at it in the Machzor, it is not translated like it's a quote. It's just part of this song. But you all of a sudden you're saying something that's a quote from Psalms. Yeah, Murray.
Since the door has been opened, I just have an observation that we lose the opportunity to really understand the meaning of the prayers that we recite, because in every synagogue that I've attended, whether on this continent, in Europe, Mediterranean area, the prayers we just go through, zip through, and we don't have time to stop and reflect on what we are saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that Jewish prayer is trying to do lots of different things. And I think to really understand Jewish prayer, you also have to study Jewish prayer outside of when you're praying. I think when you're praying, the goal is to say the words and then like maybe hopefully to have some kind of a sense of connection to yourself, to the Jewish people, to God through the process of zipping through the Siddur, as you say. And I think there's also an aspect, right? Dr. Summer talked to us when he came earlier this year for Scholar in Residence. He talked briefly about the way in which, like, actually saying these prayers is sort of a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice of time, and it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice to not say your own words, but to say somebody else's words, right? That actually there's a spiritual benefit to sublimating your will to the tradition's will or to God's will by saying words that are given to you by tradition instead of saying whatever comes into your heart in that moment. And so there's a spiritual power to the way that we pray using a set text and a prayer book. But I also think that if we don't spend the time that it takes outside of the prayer service itself to really understand what we're doing, then we will miss an opportunity to emotionally connect. Now, there are lots of ways to emotionally connect to prayer. Some people can come to services and not know what a single word means and still connect through the music and through the other people who are there and through the sense of hearing the Hebrew, even if they don't know what it means, and through a sense of history and tradition. And right, like there are lots of ways to connect. So I don't think that our prayer service is like completely not useful at all if you can't understand it or if you don't understand it enough. But I do think that the more you study and the more you're able to connect these phrases to a verse, from Psalms, the more avenues there are, the more pathways you have for connection and for emotional impact and for relationship building. And I think more avenues is better than fewer avenues. Gary, right? Yeah.
I only wanted to add that I think the cantor can play a big role in helping to make that emotional connection.
I completely agree. Right, the music that we do in the service, and having somebody with a beautiful voice who can sing it beautifully and who understands the words and has done that hard work of trying to understand the meaning, and then can therefore pick a musical arrangement that elevates the certain phrases or certain aspects. I absolutely think, and I don't know that it needs to be a cantorial leader, but somebody with a lot of musical knowledge, or who has done that kind of study. We talk about a shaliach tzibur, the emissary of the community, who leads the community, not just by saying the words in front of the community, but in fact by helping them to access the emotional tenor of the prayers. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of what our prayers are supposed to be, and that's why we invest as a community in bringing in a cantor for the high holidays. Yeah. All right, we'll close. We'll close with, I'm gonna read this from Psalm Songs, the Gaia Aronoff Bernstein's reinterpretations of the psalm. It's not a translation, it's a reinterpretation. Wait, before I do that, Lisa, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I didn't mean to unmute, but I just wanted to say this has been an awesome class. Thank you. I got so much out of it today.
All right, so we'll close with this reinterpretation of Psalm 35, and next week we will look at Psalm 36. All right, 35. Fight for me. Aim your arrows at those who seek my death. Speak to me. Tell me you're on my side. Tell me you're planning their doom. Send me an angel to keep them at bay, to drive them away, to turn them to dust. I never saw it coming. They were part of me. I nurtured them, and now they turn around and try to eat my flesh. I'm crying out to you. Come here, come now. Don't turn away. Attention must be paid. They have the strength of lions, see me as their prey, and want to eat me whole. I'm weak. They're hungry. Only you can change the course of any war. Restore my hope. So fight for me. Let me survive, and I'll write poems, songs. I'll tell the world. I won't be shy, embarrassed, coy, to say, you save. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's definitely much more spiritual than any other rabbi I remember having.